Aurora police did not dispatch a mental health worker to a situation over the weekend where a robbery suspect got on an RTD bus with a knife. The man, who's on a work release from a program for people with mental health issues, was eventually shot and killed by officers. We asked about whether Aurora's co-responder program for mental health might have been called in that situation. And that's how our Mark Salinger learned Aurora police don't currently have any mental health responders to send in if they want it.
Sunday night on Colfax in Aurora saw flashing lights and evidence markers. Police shot and killed a man on an RTD bus who they say was threatening people.
The suspect was reported to be armed with a large knife.
Aurora Police Interim Chief Dan Oates says the man left a work release program for inmates with mental health and substance abuse issues. Officers found him on the bus after he robbed a store. I asked the chief late last night if a clinician with the co-responder program was dispatched to the scene, since the man was coming from a facility dealing with mental health issues.
My understanding is that there was no one with those skills working at the time of this event.
We now know the reason why there was no one working. Because Aurora Police currently doesn't have a single clinician working in the co-responder program that sends an officer and a mental health professional to crime scenes together.
At this exact moment, we have 0 actual co-responding clinicians at the moment.
Courtney Tossan is the Crisis Intervention Programs Manager for the City of Aurora. Clinicians in the co-responder program usually go to calls of all types dealing with mental health issues. Anything from active shooters to trespassing and everything in between. It's important to note we don't know if a clinician would have responded to this scene last night, even if there was anyone working in the program.
Well, there are people that are very interested, but you have to be willing to adequately pay those people and give them benefits that makes this worth it. Because when you go to grad school to be a therapist, you're not exactly expecting to put a bulletproof vest on every day.
Instead, Aurora's mobile response team, which pairs a mental health clinician and a paramedic to respond to nonviolent calls, is picking up some of the dispatches.
That mobile response team is helping and serving as a co-responder team of sorts, where officers are requesting that team to come out and serve more in the co-responder role when they're available and able to.
Fully staffed, the co-responder program has 5 clinicians working in teams with specifically trained police officers. Last year, they responded to more than 1,000 calls. But the team hasn't been fully staffed since 2017 and hasn't had a single clinician for more than a month now. Now we know why the chief of police told us last night that no clinicians were able to respond.
And certainly we know, Mark, that they're not going to be appropriate in every situation. I thought it was interesting, though, that Chief Oates said to us, well, there just wasn't anybody available. So what are we looking at in terms of a timeline to get these folks hired, and then what happens in the meantime?
Yeah, Aurora says that they're in the middle of finalizing a new contract to hopefully raise pay and benefits for clinicians, though there's no timeline about when employees will be out on the streets and train. You heard Courtney say it herself. Not a lot of people who go to school to be a therapist expect to be putting on bulletproof vests. It's a difficult but important job.
And more communities are talking about the potential for it to save lives. Mark, thank you. So after 3 separate police shootings over the weekend, there were community activists in Denver and Aurora today asking for a statewide task force to do police oversight. These are groups that have spent years advocating for police transparency and accountability. They met today on the steps of the state capitol. They say the time for local action at the city and county level has passed. They want change on the state level.
I think we need to just look at a culture of trigger happiness that pervades our police departments.
Enough is enough. You felt as if you had a division between us. There is no division. We are one and the same. We are united. Our voices are together. The NAACP, the ACLU, we are bringing everyone into this circle right now.
This proposal for a group to oversee police actions statewide is still real early. It's still in the planning stages. The Supreme Court says it will not intervene in Dominion Voting Systems' defamation suit against MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell. Denver-based voting software company is suing Lindell over his unsupported claims that Dominion rigged the 2020 presidential election. Dominion suing Lindell, along with some members of former President Trump's legal team, Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell. Dominion is seeking $1.3 billion in damages from the 3 of them. Basically said that they tried to ruin Dominion's good name and business worldwide, even after the Trump team, including Attorney General Bill Barr, told them their claims were false. The Supreme Court's decision not to hear that case basically just allows Dominion's suit to proceed as usual. A Dominion spokesperson told us today they're pleased to see the accountability process move forward. Republican candidate for governor Heidi Ganahl continues to stand by her claim that kids are identifying as cats in schools all across Colorado and that schools are tolerating this. School districts in the metro area tell us they have no idea what Ganahl is talking about. This thinly veiled anti-transgender slippery slope argument that transgender kids will lead to kids identifying as animals, it certainly is not new. But it is newly popular among conservative politicians nationwide over the last few weeks. Republican gubernatorial candidate Heidi Ganahl's repeated claim that kids are identifying as cats in schools across Colorado, it's quite similar to what the Republican candidate for governor in Minnesota also said last week.
Why do they have litter boxes in some of the school districts so kids can pee in them?
Here's a Republican state legislator in Tennessee, also last week.
Children who identify as snakes, cats, whatever.
Here's Georgia's Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Okay, if some student wants to pretend like a cat and use a litter box after school, that's their prerogative, whatever. But no, the school and school resources and the other students and teachers should not have to be put through that.
We found similar recent claims in Wyoming, South Carolina, Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, New York, Illinois, Oregon, Texas, Indiana, Nevada, even Canada, where school leaders in Newfoundland said, children in schools express themselves in many ways, but these rumors appear to be rooted in hate and, in general, are attempts by some to further marginalize already marginalized groups. Schools in the Denver metro area have strongly disputed Ganahl's claim. Jeffco schools saying there is absolutely no truth to this claim. Boulder Valley hasn't been an issue at all. Cherry Creek, this is a non-issue for our schools. Denver, this is not something DPS has been experiencing. Despite that, Ganahl stood by her claim for the 6th time today while on KOA radio.
It's such a huge distraction to teaching kids. This is yet another example of how the governor and many in the media are just living in a bubble.
We are getting some feedback tonight about the 7 debates that we hope to air on 9 News this election season. Don and Jan in Cedar Edge on the Western Slope echoed a question asked by a number of you. 7 debates, but no debate between Republican Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who represents Western Colorado, and her Democratic challenger Adam Frisch. That's correct. Let me explain. So we invited the Republican and Democratic candidates for governor, U.S. Senate, Attorney General, Secretary of State, Treasurer, and then when it came to the 8 congressional races in Colorado, we're only hosting debates for the 2 races that appear to be most competitive. So that's the 8th in Adams and Weld counties and the 7th in Jeffco. At the end of the day, it was just how do we allocate our resources, namely me and Marshall Zellinger. We know that Congresswoman Boebert attracts a lot of media attention. I haven't seen evidence that her race is going to be particularly close. It looks like she's going to cruise to re-election in that Republican district. So we focused on what we thought would be the most competitive races. And we should note, you saw that big screen of all the folks we invited. All of the invited candidates have agreed to debate here, with the exception of Republican gubernatorial candidate Heidi Ganahl. Quick thank you for what you have done with your most recent Word of Thanks micro-giving campaign. You've raised more than $15,000 in a couple of days to support an indigenous nonprofit that works to empower Native communities in Colorado. The nonprofit Spirit of the Sun teaches young people restorative farming practices, and then they take the food that they grow and some other produce and they distribute it to elders and young families in need. Your weekly Word of Thanks campaigns, 121 of them in all, have now raised $9.6 million for nonprofits across Colorado. Do you know of another nonprofit that could use our help? Email me your ideas. next@9news.com is the email. I'll be back Wednesday with a new idea. Colorado's about to get a ton of federal taxpayer money.
A huge investment here, multi-billions of dollars coming down from the federal government.
Environmental advocates want the state to make a major investment, aka spend that cash. And we'll meet the teenagers convinced that solving our biggest problems starts with sitting down to talk. Next. Colorado's on track to get billions of federal taxpayer dollars from the so-called Inflation Reduction Act. One of the stated goals is fighting climate change. Now you got 9 environmental groups from across the state uniting to call for what they're referring to as once-in-a-generation funding. A letter from the groups to local and state leaders said they would like to see the funding from that law used to expand clean energy, invest in public transit and electric vehicles, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and create new jobs. A lot of that work's going to be done through federal and state tax credits and grants, but funding will also go directly to the local level. The climate activists say the first step is making sure those local leaders know that the funding exists and how they should get at it.
This is the largest investment Congress has ever made in fighting climate change in U.S. history. So this is an unprecedented amount of funding and support for states and local governments that's going to come through here. And so that was part of the reason that we wanted to send this letter, was to make local governments aware that this money is coming.
The tool for local governments to tap into the funding would be grants or tax incentives. In the meantime, the environmentalists are urging local leaders to get ahead of the game by changing zoning laws and building codes to require more energy efficient builds. A critical tool for preventing fires in our forests, as you well know, is purposefully starting fires, cleaning out extra fuel during calm weather so that bad fires have less to burn in extreme weather. But the U.S. Forest Service prescribed fire program has been on hold for months. It's ready to restart with some rules. The Forest Service canceled all of its prescribed burns for the summer after one of them turned into the Hermit's Peak fire down in New Mexico. Largest fire in state history, burned more than 500 square miles. Forest Service report found that the fire blew up because there was more brush on the ground than they predicted. The agency is restarting burns with new rules in place, trying to limit the risk of their prescribed burns getting out of control. But it's also going to make it harder for more intensive projects to ever get approved and scheduled for burns. The rules are only impacting prescribed fires on Forest Service lands.
Nice to have a little sunshine early, and then this afternoon into this evening, here we go. The clouds, the rain, all starting to push in across downtown Denver. As we look out there, you can see not only the Front Range kind of getting in on the action, but also far southeastern Colorado looking at a bit of rainfall coming through. As we zoom in across the I-25 corridor, nothing severe, but yes, you're getting a nice little drink of water out there, as we do have some solid rain showers coming across the north side of downtown. And then here we are right at Logan and Spear. Just looked out the window with a little light rainfall coming our way. As we go throughout the rest of the evening, these scattered showers will be shifting off to the east. It's about 11 o'clock or so. Most of the action well east of I-25. And tomorrow morning we wake up to just a little bit of patchy fog. Should not last long, and everything kind of clearing out throughout the day. However, late tomorrow night we might see another little round come through. I'd say between about 9 and 11 o'clock at night. Temps tomorrow on the cooler side. Back to the upper 60s we go. Feeling good. Some spots in the 70s off to the eastern plains. And then we really begin to dry out as we look ahead toward the rest of the week. A little cooler on Friday. So far, the mid-70s. Return by the weekend.
Teenagers get mic'd up to talk about the things that divide us.
I learned so much by listening to others' stories.
Their effort to bring us together. Next. Like we're the Salida S there, or the Golden Mines M on the hill. Racism, equity, and local politics are not a light issue to discuss. Byron Reed shows us an intergenerational approach to talking about the tough stuff.
Do you want to be next to each other? Words are heard when you have a voice.
Hello and welcome back to Generation Collaboration.
That's the idea behind a new podcast that focuses on change.
It's really about having these intergenerational conversations with youth and adults and talking about each of their stories and bringing light to sheltered topics within our communities.
Sonakshi Shrivastava is one of the co-hosts of Generation Collaboration, a youth-led podcast produced by Youth on Record and Colorado Young Leaders.
Today's conversation is about access to higher education.
Sonakshi and her co-host Braden Parsons invite local adult leaders and youth onto their show to talk about social issues in their communities.
One of the topics that we discussed that I really liked was equity in education, and talking about how obviously the education system is not very fair for everyone. It's not equal.
We talk about things like restorative justice, equity in education. We talk about making space your own.
Both Sonakshi and Braden are seniors at local high schools. They say their experiences growing up are part of the reason why they wanted to host the monthly podcast.
Being a South Asian woman, I think that definitely plays a factor into that because I want to be able to provide that representation.
As a gay kid in a private Christian high school, it's a little difficult. I've faced a few challenges along the way, and a big reason why I'm on this podcast is to highlight the voices of youth so other youth can hear, if they're doing it, I can do it.
It's a democratizing tool to create podcasts that center youth voices.
David Layden is the Youth Success Manager for Youth on Record. He says the mission is to give a platform for young people to have their voices heard.
There are very few platforms for them to have their voices amplified. And so part of the core values of our program are to provide the tools and resources for young people to talk about and explore the things that are important to them.
The goal is for these two co-hosts to make connections.
Our entire podcast is all about stories, and I really believe in the power of storytelling.
And give their listeners more than words can say.
Youth can change the world, and it's all by starting and impacting that one person. So just get involved and be you.
For Next,
And we'll see you next time.
I'm Byron Reed.
Youth on Record tells us its podcast programs, along with sparking those conversations, are also meant to prepare students to work in the growing podcast industry. The most Colorado thing we saw today is a restaurant patron identifying as a horse. That and your feedback next. The most Colorado thing we saw today is the inevitable evolution of an old-time favorite here. Segments often featured people riding horses to bars or through drive-thrus. It's about time we found a place where the horse can tie on a feedback right alongside the humans as they eat. Next viewer named Lark Golden sent us these photos. If you see something that just says Colorado to you, send it our way. Email next@9news.com or give us a shout on Twitter with the hashtag HeyNext. Pearl writes in tonight about gubernatorial Heidi Ganahl's claim about kids identifying as cats all over Colorado. Pearl says kids used to identify as vampires, goths, etc. in my school years. Pearl says I'd see kids with collars and leashes, and that was 2 decades ago. Nobody batted an eye because the teenage years are often full of phases and awkwardness. Josh writes in tonight to say, I urge you to slow down on the news tonight. It's the weirdest thing, Josh. I was just thinking about this the other day. To try and get more in, to learn more about what people are saying, I started listening to podcasts on double speed, and I wondered, would I start doing it myself? That would be annoying from your perspective, clearly. I'll try not to. See you next time.